Slepsky.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Joe on Joe Illustrated. This is issue 35 of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, the comic book. That's right, this is normally our Patreon exclusive podcast where we go through every single issue of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero in sequential order in painstaking detail, page by page, panel by panel, and break it down for you. And every 5 issues we like to share with the entire feed. If you're interested in hearing more of this, please go to patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod and see how you can get access to every single issue of Joe on Joe Illustrated. Now, before we get going, guys, I've got something really cool to share with you this week. And in order to see it, you're going to have to go to Facebook. So please go to Facebook/JoeOnJoePod and you can find the page and like it and all that stuff. And I'm going to send a big shout out right now to friend of the show, Philip Barnes. Philip, you know what this is all about. He sent me, based on listening to some older episodes of ours, he was listening and he drew file cards for me and my beautiful wife, Rebecca Slepsky, as our Joe on Joe code name. So we've got full file cards with Rebecca as Toilet Teal, the Cobra cleaning lady. And we've also got a file card in with my old name, but it takes nothing from this. My name of Deep Dish. And it's got me, they're done in the traditional file card G.I. Joe's format with the explosion behind them. They look amazing. Philip, these are so great. There's even 2 versions. There's one of Rebecca in a black Cobra outfit, and then there's one of her in a blue Cobra outfit. She's got a toilet plunger over her shoulder, and a bottle of Windex in one hand. And I am bursting off the page with podcast microphones in my hand, and a devilish look in my eye. These are so fantastic. He sent them to me last month, and I've just been waiting for this public issue of Joe and Joe Illustrated to spread the word, guys. They're really great. Let's see. Let's read his file card info. The name is Joseph Slepsky. His primary military specialty is mass communications. Secondary military specialty is 80s pop culture intelligence specialist. His birthplace, Chicago, Illinois. You'd think his known romance with Toilet Teal would cause his teammates to question his loyalty, but the Joes and Deep Dish's squad trust him with their lives. An amiable, steady, and intelligent leader, his diverse team of experts follow him anywhere. This Joe broadcasts valuable information to troops via the Joe on Joe podcast and connects with fans on major social media sites. Quote, some say I'm like a Chicago-style pizza, deep, enjoyable, and a little cheesy. I mean, come on. I'd buy the hell out of that action figure. That's amazing. All right, here we go. Cobra Cleaning Lady, code name Toilet Teal. File name is Rebecca Slepsky. Her primary military specialty is cleaning house. Her secondary specialty is reluctant podcaster. Birthplace, Los Angeles, California. Brought on board to bolster the Cobra core values of cleanliness, reinforce its brand, and improve troop morale. Toilet Teal is the unsung backbone of Cobra life off the battlefield. In fact, the Cobra soldiers in Springfield, California, schedule Mexican nights every Thursday just so Toilet Teal has a reason to visit them on Friday afternoons. Some say the Baroness can turn heads, but Toy can turn hearts. She's trained in the Mansfield, Wolverine, diaphragm, and float cup flush valve toilet systems. Additional intelligence on this Cobra operative can be found under her alias at imdb.com/nm5263683. That's her IMDb page, Rebecca Wallensack. Oh, that's hilarious. Quote, Baroness, ha! That chick may be crazy, but I could still mop the floor with her. Mop, get it? The pun, mop. It's just, Philip, these are fantastic. I appreciate these so much, man. This is so great. Thank you. Thank everyone for listening. It's honestly, if you guys ever done like things like podcasts or social media stuff, it is this kind of outreach that makes all the hours, all the other stuff worthwhile. So I love it. So go to our Facebook page. We'll be sharing it on there. I'll throw it out on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. You can find all that at Joe and Joe Pod on Twitter and Instagram. But we'll make sure it's on Facebook and just love it. Just absolutely love it. And before we get going with the show, remember to check out the Dreamer Comics podcast. It's our friend Omar Spahi's podcast, and he breaks down what it takes to get into the field of comic books. Talks to all kinds of comic creators, from writers to pencilers to inkers to publishers even. And he knows everybody. He's a publisher himself and a writer himself. He's a very talented guy. And he breaks down the hows and the whys of, getting your comic book together and get it out there. I literally saw him just the other day. We were down at Long Beach Comic-Con, and we were talking podcasts. We were talking plans for our podcasts. So it's the what is it? The Pentaveret. The Pentaveret. It's the great Marvel team up between Joe on Joe and Dreamer Comics podcast. So check Omar's podcast out, guys. You will not be disappointed. I think that's all for house cleaning this week, unless I can think of anything else. Otherwise, we're going to get right into the show. And you guys, if you know what Joe and Joe Illustrated is all about, you know that we're all about looking at what was on the shelf at the time back in the day. So to kind of put this comic book in context and look at the other comics that were happening when this was on the shelf. So if you've got a love of comic book history, or if you want to learn more about comic book history, this is a great place to do it. So we call this segment You Were Saying, and we start with DC Comics. And this is G.I. Joe number 35. And G.I. Joe 35 came out in May of 1935. Now, remember, last month, Crisis on Infinite Earths had just started. So, of course, we get Crisis number 2. And we've got, over in DC Comics Presents, Ambush Bug shows up in DC Comics Presents number 81. I'll talk about Ambush Bug every week until he stops showing up. This is like apparently the meat era of Ambush Bug. I think I've got every Ambush Bug appearance, literally going back to the early days. And I don't think I ever realized how much they were all grouped into this like 83, 85 era. Like Ambush Bug was everywhere. And then someone got a hold of Giffen, was like, all right, we're done with Ambush Bug, enough. And then they put him away for a good number of years. And then they brought him out again, and then they put him away. Ambush Bug's he's an acquired taste, but let's put it this way. I've acquired that taste. I like him quite a bit. Miniseries that we talked about a little bit a few months back called Superman the Secret Years. It wraps up this month. It's issue 4. And what was really interesting about this is that they were kind of filling in this gap between Superman leaving Smallville and going off to Metropolis. But it was right before the John Byrne Superman reboot, which negated a lot of it. So this series itself, I absolutely believe gets lost in the shuffle, like the historical shuffle. But it is 100% worth picking up because the covers are done by none other than Mr. Frank Miller, and they're gorgeous covers. The book itself is really good. It doesn't really impact any continuity at all because it would get thrown away almost immediately, and it never really had much of an impact in that regard. It's written by Bob Rozakis and drawn by Kurt Swan. So, and Kurt Schaffenberger did the arts. So, I mean, that's going to be a really well done book. If you guys aren't familiar with Bob Rozakis' stuff, he was the DC answer man in the letter columns for a good number of years. He was DC's answers to Marvel's Mark Grunwald. And Rozakis knows everything. In fact, he's still online on Twitter. And if you ever have any question about like this era, 80s, 70s, 80s DC, and frankly earlier, but he was there during the 70s and the 80s. If you have any question about stuff like that, you ping him on Twitter, you hit him up, and he will get back to you. And he's so great, and he's so gracious with his time and knowledge. I remember I found some random comic book that I could not find a place for, and he knew exactly what it was from. I was like, oh, he just got back to me right away. He's like, oh, this is a promotional comic, blah, 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 blah. It's great. Bob Rozakis, I was always a big fan of, and he's a really solid writer. So check out Superman the Secret Years. I'm not sure if they've ever really reprinted it, but it's not terribly difficult to find on the back issue market. We had 2 issues of The Flash hit this month, and I have a strong, strong feeling this is to sync the book up with Crisis, because Flash is going to die in 6 months, and they needed to have Flash wrapped up, and they wanted to get Flash up to issue number 250. So in order to do that, they needed to kind of up the ante, and I would bet dollars to donuts that is why this month we have 2 issues. We have Flash 345 and Flash 346. It's right in the middle of the trial of the Flash. And I will bet that is why. I love The Flash, love the trial of the Flash, always good stuff. Infinity Inc. 14 is on the shelf. This is a part of an important run because it is Todd McFarlane's first mainstream comic book work, everybody. But he did about 10 issues or so, or maybe a little more, of Infinity Inc. before his style really started breaking away and becoming the stuff that we knew and loved when he went over to Marvel and did Hulk and Spider-Man. You can see glimpses of it in his early stuff, and that's on Infinity Inc. So this month is Infinity Inc. number 14. It is McFarlane's first issue. I thought it was. I wasn't sure when I was speaking, and I don't want to go back and edit it. It absolutely is McFarlane's first issue on Infinity Inc. So check that out. That might run you a little bit more in the back issues, but generally it shouldn't. I gotta imagine at the most maybe it's a $10 book, but it really should. Infinity Inc. Pretty common book, but a really well done book. And you've got Todd McFarlane. Yeah, I'm in. And that's going to be it for now. DC Comics in May 1985. So let's head on over to Marvel. And
you were saying,
if you listened last month, the two actually Joe and Joe Illustrated issue number 34, which technically was just a few days ago, but we call them months because I can't differentiate time. So if you're a patron, you heard that last month. In the Marvel books, there were a lot of the Star comic book, a lot of number ones for the Star comic books. It goes to reason that it was like the launch month for the line. And that month continues because we have one of the greatest books, fun books to embrace comicdom, and is really the start of the Spider-Verse, which is something we're going to be getting in in an animated movie in a couple months. We got, obviously, the giant Spider-Verse crossover about 2 years ago, where basically Spidey was meeting all these alternate dimensional versions of himself. And this is Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. I guess you could say any Spider-Man story that appeared in What If was an alternate universe version of Spider-Man. But I feel like spiritually, Spider-Ham is any kind of Spider-Verse because it's really just conceptually 180 degrees away from Peter as a human being, and he's a pig with spider powers. So if you thought Spider-Pig was first mentioned in Simpsons movie, you were wrong. Spider-Ham, the Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, it's a funny animal gag strip with Spider-Man and Spider, and actually not just Spider-related villains, but like farm-related villains. There was Jeremiah Jackal. There was J. Jonah Jackal, Bunsen Bunny, Jesus, the Fantastic Fur, featuring Mooster Fantastic, he was a moose, Simeon Torch, he was a gorilla, the Invisible Gorilla, of course, Simeon's sister, so that makes sense. And I don't know who Thang was. Ben Grizzly. Okay, so it sounds like he was a bear. And, of course, Forbush Man. Doctor Doom. He was a duck in Dr. Doom's outfit. This is great. His books are amazing. And that's not the only Star comic number one this month. This month was also featured, I believe, here it is. Ewoks number one from Star Wars. Muppet Babies number one. They'll do the same for you, Muppet Babies. They'll make your dreams come true, everybody. The Get Along Gang number one came out this month. Here's a book that I have absolutely no knowledge of. Royal Roy. This apparently is a Richie Rich ripoff book, and boy, does it look terrible. No offense to anybody. Oh my gosh, John D'Agostino. He inked it. John D'Agostino from G.I. Joe. We love his stuff. Oh, well, hey, listen, honestly, Marie Severin did the colors. She recently passed. We love her work. A lot of good people work on a lot of books that just go nowhere. And this really seems like a complete rip of Richie Rich. So, Royal Roy, A Prince of a Boy. Now, in the mainstream Marvel Universe, there are some really good books to be on the lookout for. Captain America number 305. This was, if you remember a few issues back, Cap had finally defeated the Red Skull. And so now he was they were branching him off, and he was trying to fight new villains because, let's move on a little bit and let's try to broaden his universe of bad guys. And this issue is written by the great editor, Mike Carlin. It's drawn by Paul Neary, and the cover features Captain Britain on it. The cover is a cool attempt. I would like to see this cover redone in the Photoshop era because there's a bright light that's coming off Captain Britain's hands. And in this pre-Photoshop era, it doesn't play as well as I think artistically Paul Neary, who is brilliant, I think artistically, I think the way they wanted it to look, it's a little harder on the eyes than it probably should be. Paul Neary, of course, inked Alan Davis for so many years and is a really talented dude. But I primarily bring this book up, not for any of those reasons, but because I love Captain Britain and I love pre-Excalibur appearances of Captain Britain. I think the way they built his character up, technically, he did have a big publishing history in Britain, a la Captain America, but in Britain. But the way they introduced him in the American comics, I think, is the right way to introduce new characters, to seed him. Like he would show up in Marvel Team Up, and then here in Captain America, and then in a few other places. And then eventually he gets worked in to the world of the X-Men, via Betsy Braddock. And then all of a sudden, here's a team called Excalibur. And then that's where everyone comes to know and love him after a few years of kind of drilling him into your subconsciousness. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with Captain Britain. He's great. Hulk 307 is, I believe, continuing the Crossroads story where Hulk's going from dimension to dimension. But I bring this issue up because it has a strong cover by Mike Mignola and Steve Lialoha. Hulk is like in chains. It looks like he's actually broken them. He might even be naked, ladies and gentlemen. But it's like the energy is exploding off of him in really strong yellows and reds and oranges, contrasting with his green body. It's a very cool cover. Hulk 307, check that out. Mighty Avengers number 255. This, for my money, was a bit of a down era for the Avengers. Now, I say that, and I'm about to say, but it was written by Roger Stern and drawn by John Buscema, inked by the amazing Tom Palmer. Now, all three of those names are Murderer's Row. Roger Stern Spider-Man's my favorite stuff of all time. But John Buscema is amazing, and Tom Palmer is a literal legend. For some reason, this era of the Avengers just kind of goes under the radar. It's well done, but there was, I don't know what it was. There was just something about this era that never really pops, even though they do great things like introduce Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau Captain Marvel, later to be Photon. Eventually, they're the book that discovers, along with the Fantastic Four, they discover Jean Grey. It leads up to the really cool assault on Avengers Mansion where the Masters of Evil show up. There's Spider-Man tries to join for real for the first time. There's cool stuff, but first Nebula was introduced, but for some reason it never really gels. It's not really known as a strong era. But I say all that, and the reason I bring all that up is because this cover is something that wasn't normal for the era. It looks as if it's done in watercolor. It's by Tom Palmer. It's a beautiful cover. It's either watercolor or maybe colored pencil, but it's definitely some type of different artistic overlay than just a traditional, pen and ink or pencil and ink and then color job. It looks like it's either colored pencils or actual paint, and it's great. It's a really good looking cover. Check out Avengers 255 and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And give that era a read. There's some great stuff in it. It's just it I don't know why. I don't know. There's something about it that always just seems to run below. Maybe, you know what? As I'm saying this, I think maybe it's the roster, because they didn't have a lot of the stalwarts on there. Because you had people like Star Fox, Eros, who I like as a character, but he's no heavy hitter. Instead of Thor, you have Hercules, and Hercules, even at the time, he's never really risen to be major league AAA status. The Black Knight, who again I like, but he's not a major character. And then Captain Marvel, Photon, they were just introducing her and trying to get her build up her audience. So you only really have Cap, and then the Wasp was on the team too. So maybe that's why. And if you extrapolate this thought pattern out over to like what they did over at DC with Justice League, when they went to the non-heavy hitters in Justice League Detroit, while that didn't hit, so to speak, what they did was they said, let's change the venue. And so they were attempting to like not only just add different dudes, but shift gears. And that shift gears didn't work. But then they did it again with the GIF and DeMatteis bwahaha funny stuff, and then that worked. And it was a total tonal shift for what the book was, but they also got away with using the underused characters. And in this case, if I recall everything correctly, the Avengers really didn't change direction as far as like the things they were doing, where they operated out of, all that stuff. They just literally had different characters, and the characters were mostly B-list. And maybe that's why it was missing that element. Maybe you need to combine both the shift in core members and then a shift in direction. I don't know. Something to think about. So I think that's all for Marvel Comics.
You were saying?
And now let's go to the movie theater. And let's see what movies were in the theater in May of 1985. May 3rd, you've got three fun movies, quite frankly. Wow, this would have been a murderer's row of kind of bad, kind of fun movies. You've got 3 movies. Code of Silence with Chuck Norris. It's one of those terrible, probably made by Canon Films, right? Gotcha, which is a fun movie. I've tried to revisit it, and it doesn't really hold up, but I remember seeing it a lot when I was a kid and really digging it, where Anthony Edwards and Linda Fiorentino star. Anthony Edwards is over in Paris on a school trip, and he accidentally gets mistaken for a spy, like a James Bond kind of spy, and he has to, live in that world. And in the U.S., he plays a game where a game called Gotcha, where the game is like fake. You could never get away with playing it today, quite frankly, on campuses, but it was like fake. It was like tag, but like assassination. So he would get assigned someone to assassinate. And so when he goes to Europe, he then he falls in line with actual assassins and stuff. There was another movie that was very much like this that I constantly get confused with, and it was called Tag the Assassination Game. Now, this game came out in 1982, and this was, I feel like it was the same. Maybe I'm mixing I think I'm still actually currently mixing them up, but I think I liked Tag better. This was from 82. Tag was they would run around with fake plastic suction cup darts and like shoot each other, and then of course someone starts shooting for real and killing people for real. So Tag and Gotcha, I always mixed them up in my head, and I think the last time I tried to watch Gotcha, I wanted to watch Tag, and then I was disappointed that it wasn't it, and I didn't turn it off all the way. Anyway, the other movie, Gymkata, which is like taking 1984 Olympic. Remember 84? And 84 was all about the Olympics and the gymnasts and Mary Lou Retton and all that stuff. Taking that craze and turning it against ninjas. Gymkata. Everything else is garbage that month except for get to the final 2 weeks and you got some amazing movies. You actually got 4 amazing movies. May 22nd, Brewster's Millions, starring the incomparable John Candy and Richard Pryor. It's a very, very, very cool movie. According to Wikipedia, they've made this movie 7 times. Or at least 7 times as of that making of it. It's great. If you've never seen Brewster's Millions, seek it out. Of course, May 22nd, we also have Rambo, First Blood Part 2. One of the more confusing titles, because the first movie was not called Rambo, but now this one's called Rambo, First Blood Part 2. Then the third movie just becomes Rambo 3. Then the next movie becomes John Rambo. And then they did Rambo. So the movie they're doing Rambo now. So the movie called Rambo, the most recent movie that they're going to make, Rambo Part 2 is actually anyway, you know where I'm going with that. But Rambo, come on, it's Rambo. I mean, it invaded American culture and to this day has meaning. They may not be great movies, but they have absolute cultural significance. On May 22nd, A View to a Kill premiered, which is James Bond. This was a big Bond movie for me when I was a kid. Octopussy was my first one. So this was like the second Bond movie for me that I had anticipation for, that I knew was coming out, and I was looking forward to it, and I needed to see it, and I needed to experience it. Glad that it's Roger Moore's last Bond movie, because he was a little long in the tooth at this point, but still fantastic. The Duran Duran theme song is amazing. The story's funny, because you have Christopher Walken, who's always great, playing a wacko, what is his name? Zorn. The plot of the movie involves him like blowing up silicon mines because the writers of the movie thought Silicon Valley meant silicate sand that they made microchips out of, not that it was a proverbial Silicon Valley where all the brain power was. So that resulted in Zorn trying to monopolize the actual microchip market because there's no other sand in the world. You know, like he was going to blow a nuclear bomb and irradiate the whole valley. I don't get it, but there's some great set pieces in it. So View to a Kill is an absolute classic. And then the next week, May 31st, final movie of May, 85, the movie Fletch. I am not a big fan of Chevy Chase, but this is one of the movies that I can absolutely tolerate him in. It's well done. It's, Chevy Chase, Tim Matheson, Gene Davis, Jodan Baker, Mitchell. I guess these are based on really, really popular books. Like, they're fantastic books. And this is the only one that was made. Kevin Smith talked for years about making a remake or sequel or something like that. And they did Fletch Lives, but they've tried to reboot. I know Jason Lee was attached to it for a long time. I remember not loving this when it came out, but I think it was just because it was over my head. This is where you get the joke. What is it? I'm 6'2", 6'10" with afro. Yeah, Chevy Chase is a very specific spot for me when it comes to comedy. If he's doing one thing, I can tolerate it, but when he does other stuff, it's real painful to watch. So that's what was in the movie theater in May of 1985. So now we go over to the actual comic book, G.I. Joe number 35. Egotistical peacock. That's right, Destro. We start with a amazing cover by Mr. John Byrne. Late 70s, early 80s Marvel. John Byrne was probably the hottest star going. Maybe Frank Miller was close behind him with his Daredevil stuff, but Byrne branched out. Byrne did more than Miller. Byrne, coming off the literal number one book of X-Men, he went over he launched Alpha Flight. He created the Fantastic Four. Created Alpha Flight. He moved to the Fantastic Four and he reinvigorated the Fantastic Four. Like, his run is just considered absolutely legendary. And at the time, he started doing a ton of covers for Marvel. He's a very prolific penciler. He actually pencils very quickly and with very high quality. A lot of pencilers go quick and the quality drops. His stuff was always really, really good. And this was one of the eras that he was doing a lot of solo covers for books. He did Daredevil. He did Spider-Man. He did a whole bunch of Web of Spider-Man covers. And this was one of his G.I. Joe ones. So we've got the Dreadnoks, Buzzer, Ripper, Torch. They're riding on their motorcycles. There's nice, you can see the symmetry of their wheels. It's just perfectly lined up on the bottom of the page. They've all got their toy specific gun that is being pointed forward. It's funny. Torch has what's obviously some kind of flamethrower device. It's cut off a little bit towards the end, but you could see that it's got the flame cowl around it. And Buzzer, you could see that he's got his the chainsaw on his gun. And for Ripper, where you would normally see the the tin can blade, it's actually covered by Torch. It's an odd choice. I feel like there should have been a little bit of editorial, I don't know, just shift it a little bit or something. I don't know. Maybe point it down. If you point it down listen, hey guys, listen, I am not here to tell John Byrne how to draw. I just find it odd that when it comes to this stuff, everything's very toy centric and identified by the toy, and you get to his and it's not on the cover. I am not here to correct John Byrne. Here's what's an awesome use on the cover is the background is filled in with basically Kirby Crackle. Love that. Love seeing that. It's probably as close as we're going to get to seeing a Jack Kirby on G.I. Joe. Yeah, so for a pretty basically simple cover, it's iconic. It totally stands out. I think the use of the circle imagery on the bottom is one of the big reasons why it just takes up a lot of that page and gives a lot of movement to just three dudes standing there yelling at nothing. Yo, Joe! Stan Lee presents Dreadnoks on the Loose. Script by Larry Hama. Pencils by, we've got a quartet here, guys. Rod Wiggum, Mark Bright, Bob Camp, and Larry Hama. Andy Muschinsky and Mike Esposito on inks, Rick Parker letters, George Russo's colors, Denny O'Neil editing, and Jim Shooter editing in chief. So now we've got 4 guys doing the pencils, and this is important. So I am not sure exactly who did everything, but I've got some pretty good guesses on most of the pages. And what I'm thinking, it seems like Wiggum and Bright did the majority of the lifting, and there's a couple pages that it might be Bob Camp and Larry working together because they have similar looks, and maybe Larry doing layouts and Bob coming in to finish him up. I'm not exactly sure, but these first couple pages are definitely Rod Wiggum, and he brings that nice hyper real look to the book. And in general, actually, there's, for having 4 different guys work on the penciling, there's a lot of great continuity here. So it makes me think maybe Larry did loose layouts on the whole thing to try to kind of tighten everything up. Also, we shouldn't go much further without pointing out that this is kind of a retread issue. This is really just a remake of G.I. Joe number 30, which, funnily enough, was also the last time that we joined you on the main Joe and Joe Illustrated feed. So this is serendipitous, to be sure. But in that issue, the Dreadnoks, if you guys remember, the Dreadnoks invaded McGuire Air Force Base, and they tore up the airplanes until the Joes were alerted and they showed up and sabotaged and all that stuff. And just broad stroke the plot that happens here, that's pretty much exactly what happens in this issue. As far as the hows and the whys, I don't know. I don't know if I have enough to estimate a guess at it, but it does strike me going through it like this, page by page breakdown stuff. It just does strike me as odd that it's pretty much the same plot, and that there's 4 guys that help put it together. Usually when you have multiple pencilers like that, that means there might have been some delay or, a breakdown in the scheduling or something like that. So there is what's cool in here, and that it's absolutely not a retread, is there is some great character stuff, and there's some really cool plot character moments that advance the whole, larger narrative. So for that, we absolutely respect it and dig it. And it is a fun issue. It's a fun concept. I think any chance you get to watch the Dreadnoks just completely destroy things and make asses of themselves, I think you should always take it. So it opens with the 3 Dreadnoks, Buzzer, Ripper, Torch. They're standing over Zartan's brand new motorcycle, and they think they shouldn't even be touching it. It's got all kinds of electronic gizmos and doodads. It's super special. Let's leave it alone. Yo, Joe! But Buzzer kind of takes the precocious lead and basically calls the other guys out as, they're chicken. Like, what do you think? What's Zartan going to do to him? And, he can't see through walls. And he says, let's take Zartan's bike out for a ride. And we get illustrated on this page that Zartan, it's kind of a tutorial on how Zartan does what he does. He's got, let's see, it says here, advanced form of holography, 3D projection that works without the funny glasses. So he may be a genius with laser optics, but he's no sorcerer. So both his suit and his vehicles and his cabin, they just project these 3D holograms, and that's what makes people think he can look like someone else or change colors, etc., so on and so forth. It's funny, the change color thing happens. Torch at the end, when Ripper says, I don't like this one bit, Torch says, what's Zartan going to do about it? Change color, which is a totally taking a shot or having fun with the fact that the action figure actually did change color. I do want to say Zartan is a complete master of disguise. He absolutely is. He's, he can do it traditionally with the face and the masks and stuff. But he's stepped up his game. And this van that the motorcycle morphs into, just throwing here's a little plug out there. It looks just like Adventure Van from Golden Apple Books, available in stores right now today. Check it out. And then one more final thing before we leave this page. I've been noticing in a lot of, I read a lot of comics, and one of the kind of page layout designs that I've noticed lately that I'm really kind of fascinated with, and I love when I see it, is happening on this page. So we'll keep an eye out for it later on too. But however many panels are on the page and whatever layout they are, the first panel, they do a lot of detail in the background. And the last panel or the last row or kind of like the end of the page, there's a lot of detail in the background to kind of give it a place of setting. But the panels in the middle, you can get away with not doing it, because it's like that first panel works as your establishing shot in a movie, saying, here they are, they're sitting in their living room. Now we can go in for more close-ups and more medium shots, but we don't have to worry about drawing the detail of what's in the distance because we've already established that in the first panel. So on this page, you got some, while it's not a wide shot per se, but there is some detail in the background that kind of puts them in a time and a place, or, puts them in a place in these sewers. Then you get no background, very light background in this broad shot of the van. It would look weird if there was no background to establish where the floor was. No background again in this final row. It's just the light show. then these last two panels start to bring you back into the background world. So it works like it's like a detailed, it's like a sandwich, really, with the buns being a higher level of detail. Whatever the level is, just a higher level of it to kind of ground your reading eye. Yo, Joe! I hope you guys check that page out. You'll see what I'm talking about. It happens a few more times in this issue, and I'm going to try to point it out when I see it. So now this next page, this is Mark Bright. Guaranteed this is Mark Bright. I love Mark Bright. He comes back to the Joe book a few years after this. And so I'm not going to do a full breakdown of his work for this issue, like of an intro of him. I'm just going to acknowledge that I absolutely adore Mark Bright's pencils, and I loved his work on Green Lantern Emerald Dawn. Obviously his G.I. Joe stuff's great. He did like that. Was it the Snake Eyes trilogy? The one when Snake Eyes gets his face rescarred and everything. I got those great Lee Weeks covers, I believe. Mark Bright is Quantum and Woody. He is a real talent. He did a bunch of Black Panther. He's amazing. And I always recognize his stuff by he gives his characters kind of a square jaw like face. It's like like an inverted pentagram kind of face, or like a pentagon, not pentagram. Pentagram would be, like Satan, but like an inverted pentagon. So if you look at, so we got this car. Let's gut to the action here, and it's Rock and Roll, and it's Clutch, and Breaker, and they're going on vacation. Now the details of their vacation do not make any sense. They're riding in Rock and Roll's sweet car. They talk later on. They talk about what is it? It's a '56 Bel Air Nomad, and it's a lovely car. He's got his surfboards on the roof and all that stuff. And these guys are decked out like they're headed to the beach. The only problem is this takes place in New York / New Jersey, and they claim to be driving to Malibu. That is a cross-country trip of epic proportions, guys. And they're definitely doing that because Rock and Roll's talking about they're not even going to hit the Rockies if they don't get gas. So they are driving cross-country. Maybe it makes sense, actually, because they just recently all got put on leave. So maybe they're actually taking like a big leave. But I thought they weren't being put on leave. They were just being put kind of in the administrative positions. So I don't know what's going on. And if you were, would you really take cause that's like a 4-day drive, especially back then? I don't know. I'm just questioning this. Doesn't matter. Love it. Bright's pencils are very clear. They're very. I love it. His acting is great. I'm a fan. If you're not familiar with Mark Bright's work, he goes by Mark. His name's Mark Bright, but he goes by Doc Bright. Check it out. His stuff's really solid. And there's a great character bit that happens on this page, and this is some of the stuff that I think makes Larry's writing really great. Is these guys are just stopping for gas, and they run into some local gas station guy, and he's talking about how much he envies the Army guys, and he would want to sign up and everything. And you get Rock and Roll just giving kind of a realistic view of, at least, in Larry's opinion, for Rock and Roll, the food is bad, the pay is low, and the hours are plain lousy, And then later on it says, they're like, why discourage him? He says, kids like that join up the same way girls his age get married. They just want to get away from whatever it is that's driving them nuts at home. And the horrible part comes when they find out they were running from themselves. I mean, this is in the middle of G.I. Joe. You get this life lesson, and he's not wrong. This guy is, running a gas station in the middle of nowhere, and he primarily wants to join just to get out of that burg. And sure, that's an opportunity, and that's what, they sell you on for real. And for a lot of people, it does work. But even for the people that it works out on, you carry your problems with you. So whatever it is about that dead-end burg that was keeping you there, sometimes you do need that outlet of saying, hey, here's an easy way to get out of town, and that works. But you're still going to have to deal with whatever it is about that burg that was holding you down. Does that make sense, guys? I hope that it does, because I think that's what Larry's speaking to in a broader way. And I love it. I absolutely love that this is in an issue of G.I. Joe, because it is so true. You could enlist in the army. You could take a job overseas. You could do whatever. But if you keep that small town mentality, or not even small town, but just whatever it is about the town you're from mentality, and if that's not what you're looking to change, then you're never going to change. It's great stuff. Yo, Joe! So now we check on the high drama of Cobra. So now we're at Cobra headquarters in Springfield, and the Baroness and Major Blood are walking through the halls, and they come across Zartan, who is knocking on a door, and the door's got a big sign that says the commander's indisposed. We also get the Baroness explaining why it's okay for Major Blood to be walking around. This page is definitely not Mark Bright. I don't think this is Rod Wiggum, so I have a feeling this is Larry Hama and Bob Camp. It might just be Bob Camp. But this is definitely the third artist working. This is not, I would bet anything that this is not Rod Wiggum. This just doesn't feel like Rod Wiggum. But Baroness and Major Blood chase Zartan off. They apparently know that the Dreadnoks stole his motorcycle, and so he's very upset with everybody. It's kind of like, we've said before that Cobra is like the high drama of like Shakespearean high drama. It's also like high school. Like they're just making fun of him because someone stole his car. Yo, Joe! This is another Mark Bright page. So it seems like Mark Bright was doing the guys in the car, and Rod Wiggum might have been doing the Dreadnok stuff. Not 100% sure on that part, because the next page I think might have been Hama based on, anyway, we'll get to that. But this is definitely Mark Bright, and we get the guys that they're cruising on the highway, they're enjoying their Yocho Colas, and they're in a great little moment. Roadblock is, or Rock and Roll is, he's telling them to imagine the contrast of the cool blue Pacific licking your ankles as the sun caresses your shoulders, and sweet melt, like, and the actual in the image is drawn this mirage of the ocean kind of engulfing these guys, and that is all interrupted with this fun panel in the middle. You don't see the bikers because they didn't see the bikers. You know, they were in this happy place, and the Dreadnoks drove by and they tore up the side of his car, not knowing that they were Joe. It's just they did it just because they're miscreants and creeps, and their car's open like a tin can. Yo, Joe! So here's Ripper, and he's now in the lead, even though it was Buzzer that stole the motorcycle. But Ripper hates Chevys because he got run off by the road once, so he just tore up that car for no good reason. And Torch is making faces at passerbys, including little children. Now the face on this little girl, I feel like that feels like a Larry Hama face, specifically kind of thinking like from the Origin issues 25, 26, but I'm not really sure if this is the Hama wig or a Wiggum page or a combination of both. All I know is definitely not Mark Bright on this page. And as they're going down the highway, they tear up more things. They tear up a hay baler truck. Then Torch sets it on fire, and they realize that those creeps in the Bel Air are following us. Yo, Joe! And now we're back to Mark Bright for sure. This page is Rock and Roll is determined to chase after those guys. So much so that he gets his Bel Air up on two wheels to dodge through traffic. You know, of course, causing accidents and stuff, plowing through flaming bales of hay, and they're heading towards a tunnel, right? So it's just a regular tunnel in the Rockies, possibly in the Rockies, because they foreshadowed it earlier. Yo, Joe! And now this is not Mark Bright, I'm fairly sure. Or if it's Bright, it's definitely with a change of inkers. Because remember, we also had two inkers on here. Because the inks on this page, they're a little heavier. I think this might have been... Yeah, this might be some... this might be Mike Esposito inking. Because the lines are all a little bit thicker. This truck looks amazing, by the way. It's the big Zartan hologram truck. We know it's a hologram. They don't necessarily know it. And it's got all kinds of skulls and chains on it. It looks 100% like something out of Mad Max Fury Road. It's great. And it comes plowing out of the tunnel. And the guys, in order to avoid it, they swerve, they skid out, and they crash their car really good. Like, it is legit destroyed. Yo, Joe! Now, this page feels like Rod Wiggum for sure. And I say that because of the two shots of Buzzer in the bottom panel when he's lighting the cigar, and then when he's smoking it, sitting on his bike, talking about while they're all broken up and trapped in a burning Hulk. those feel like the Rod Wiggum images that we'd see later in his run, because he does about like 20 some issues or so on G.I. Joe. So this definitely, and the look of, basically it is, for me, it's Ripper that tells me this is a Rod Wiggum page. They're happy that they destroyed these guys and killed them. They, again, don't know that they're G.I. Joes. But as they drive away, Rock and Roll, who is barely conscious, he sees a license plate, ZTN 123, and that's the important. It's the lodestone of this issue. Yo, Joe! So now, a few miles back in the same highway, there's another car driving with skulls and bones, and this one is license plate Zartan 456, and it's got this is a neat synchronicity, and I doubt that they would have interacted with each other, but there is a great visual little trick on this page where the headlights from this bus, and it's a fake Zartan bus. Zartan's driving it and he's using a hologram. They're casting these perfect concentric circles on the front of the picture, and because like the sun's setting, right? Well, those circles harken back to this like really large circles that Byrne was using on the cover. So I don't know if he saw the book or they saw the cover or whatnot, or if there's there's probably no real connection at all, but I do think that it's great. It also, there's a lot of vehicles in this, so the fact that you're going to see a lot of like circles repeated makes sense too. But a little lady stops the bus and gets picked up by the bus, and the bus driver really has nothing to say to her, but she's quite talkative. Yo, Joe! Now, back at the tunnel, there is all kinds of cops and firemen and ambulances and stuff, and the Joes are legit screwed up. Clutch and Breaker's hands are burned, which looks crazy. Looks like Rock and Roll might have a busted or sprained left arm. Clutch's leg looks like it's broken. And Clutch is babbling. He's talking about a truck from beyond the grave and everything. And then Breaker says, I think the devil himself joined the Teamsters. Tell the man whatever you want, Rock and Roll. And Rock and Roll is confused because it looks like Rock and Roll has a serious concussion. So they're all kinds of jacked up. I do believe this is a Mark Bright page, but possibly with the secondary anchor. Reason I'm thinking it's a Mark Bright page is the jawline on the cop, the redheaded cop in that second panel up top. That looks like a Mark Bright jawline. Also on the one paramedic that looks like a Mark Bright stuff. So very cool. But as they're loading them on, the bus drives past them. So we see that bus driver, quote, whoever he is, unquote, is going in the same directions as the Dreadnoks. Yo, Joe! So now the Dreadnoks come across another Air Force base. And this is what I'm saying with, it's another gimmick of just cutting the Dreadnoks loose on an Air Force base to cause trouble. Like we just literally just saw this. So I'm really curious as to what the what the rationale was on this here. It says, us Dreadnoks do love to bash airplanes, which is a subtle reference to the fact that the last time we saw them, they were doing exactly this. But this time, instead of breaking into the base, they use Zartan's disguise kit to disguise themselves as a 2-star general. I get that it would fool the guards as they pull up to the light, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't have to stop any car and at least just get an identification. Because you don't know who the general is. You just see, oh, it's a general. Oh, okay. Who's the general? They're like, oh, inside, it's General so-and-so. But they don't. These two dope guards are just like, anything with 2 stars on it can go anywhere it darn well pleases. Like, that is nuts. So just literally, anyway. But it's fun. It moves the plot. We'll move on. Yo, Joe! And just like in issue 30, they pull up to these, what are they? Are they F-15s? They're not Sky Strikers this time, but they pull up the F-15s and they pull out their weaponry and they're going to start just tearing the place up. And it's fun. Like I like it. It's fun, but it feels just like a rehash for me. So it's not very satisfying. Yo, Joe! Now on this page, this is Mark Bright, and the biggest way that I know it's Mark Bright is the stance that Rock and Roll is taking in the second panel. Mark Bright draws his characters a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times. One of his stock poses is them like crouched down, like they're almost doing a squat, like a weightlifting squat. If you look at a lot of Mark Bright's pictures, you see that a lot. Specifically, I can picture one or two in my head of Green Lantern that he would draw in that pose. But that's what he's got Rock and Roll doing right there. So that definitely seals it that this was Mark Bright, or at least a Mark Bright layout page for sure. Rock and Roll is he's putting two and two together because everyone saw this demon truck, and they can't all have seen the demon truck unless it was real. And so now he's trying to remember the other thing that he saw. Because remember, he's got the concussion, but he's the only one that saw the license plate. Yo, Joe! So this is just a fun splash page. Looks like Rod Wigham's work. Might be Hama influence too. But it's literally 3 giant panels. Each Dreadnought gets a spotlight at them tearing apart an F-15. Yo, Joe! We get a nice overhead shot of their destruction of this, a couple different F-15s, ripping through the glass cockpit and stuff. And just like in 30, they go too far. In 30, it was they cut the strut on the Sky Striker, and the Sky Striker literally like collapsed and fell on its own weight, and then it blew up. In this case, Torch is using his flamethrower, and he gets it too close to a fuel line, and it explodes. So it is the exact same. They're foiled by the exact same thing. And in this time, this giant explosion alerts the local security, which is exactly what happened last time. But now this time, G.I. Joe's not anywhere close, so it's just regular airport security. And when they pull up to the scene, here's a fun difference. Because Buzzer has the Zartan hologram motorcycle, makes all 3 of them, all their vehicles, look like regular military police that were already at this crime scene. And they say, hey, they gave them they went that away kind of thing. So, and you know that it's then because the license plate on his quote unquote army Jeep is ZTN 123. Yo, Joe! Now, as we checking in back on the ambulance where Rock and Roll and the guys were in there, they're driving down the highway going to the actual hospital. While they do that, they come across this military convoy that is going in the other direction because they're going to respond to the trouble at the airfield. And when they go by, there's a Jeep that goes by that says, with the license plate ZTN 123, and that jogs Rock and Roll's memory. So he throws the paramedic who's minding his own business. He throws him out of his driver's seat, and he says, hey, you can't do that. And he's like, just try to stop me. And they do a 180 in the ambulance, and now this ambulance is chasing the Dreadnoks, who in their hologram disguise. I will say, I'm reading this out of the IDW book, and there's a reproduction error or something going on. And as I was recording this, I didn't have time to dig out my original copies of this comic, so I don't know what it looked like in the original. But in the IDW Complete Collection, which is what we're reading from, the 3rd panel, which is the panel of the Dreadnoks and stuff, the whole panel is washed out. It's as if the inks weren't applied to it. Here's the deal. If you guys saw my place, my comics are very well organized, but they are they're in a very heavy boxes stacked on top of one another, and it is late at night, so I do not want to go out digging through my comics. But we'll leave this for a mystery for next time. We will get this solved within a couple issues. So it looks like this panel was reproduced uninked, and so we're gonna find out. If you guys got this far into the podcast and shoot me a note. We'll ping it out on Twitter. Yo, Joe! These are really 3 strong panels, guys. So it's very widescreen, very bold, very big panels. Speed lines on all of them. I love that the action, like the camera kind of moves across a little bit. You can see the speed lines shifting where you're at with the axis, and the Dreadnoks realize that they're being chased. And then as they do that, Torch starts to go a little too fast, so he gets out of the range of the hologram. And as they do, we then see that Rock and Roll realizes they are Dreadnoks, and he uses the only weapon he has at hand, which is an oxygen tank. Yo, Joe! And he throws it right through dead center of the Jeep. So even though there is a hologram of a Jeep, obviously the hologram is not solid, but there is an actual Jeep there. So he hits the middle of the Jeep. I guess there's not a Jeep there. There's a motorcycle in the middle. So the oxygen tank hits the motorcycle, which causes Buzzer to spill, and the whole kit and caboodle goes up in flames because sparks fly on E Street, and you get a Zartan barbecue is what you got. you got a barbecue Zan. A Zartan? Zarbecue? You got a Zarbecue. That's a Zarbecue, everybody. So you get a Zarbecue in the middle of the street with Buzzer thankfully being thrown clear, but he's caught in that explosion pretty good. And Torch and Ripper, they tear off. Yo, Joe! Only to be confronted by that spooky bus that was heading their way. The driver still never saying a word. And the old lady in the front of the window, she's quite put out. And then the front of the bus opens up and the hologram drops, and we know it wasn't a bus, but what it really was a really strangely shaped helicopter that the front opens up and the two motorcycles go flying into it. And it's, of course, piloted by Zartan. And this crazy old lady says, my goodness, I guess things aren't always what they seem to be. And the driver finally speaks, and it's Zartan, and he says, my sentiments exactly. And rock and roll grabs Buzzer, says, leave me in a burning wreck, why don't you, oughta, blah, blah, blah. So now Buzzer is in G.I. Joe's custody. That's a very exciting development. Yo, Joe! And hours later, when the helicopter lands in Springfield, they are going to kill this old lady because they can't let her know. They can't let her live knowing that where Springfield is. And her clothing, which was a frumpy hat and an overcoat and some glasses, is all that's left of her. She disappeared. She's not on this helicopter before. And Zartan points out, disappearing out of a locked helicopter in flight, that's feat worthy of a ninja master. So who was the old lady? That's the kind of great character stuff that happens in this issue. I love it. You get stuff like Buzzer getting kidnapped. You get who's masquerading to break into Springfield. That stuff's wonderful and fantastic, and I support it and I love it. I don't know why we had to get I'm curious as to what the choices were behind just doing a plot rehash of tearing up the airfield. Maybe like, oh, it worked well before, let's just do it again. But it seems like it's just 5 issues later. So, anywho, it's no complaints, guys. I really dig this issue, and I really dig you listening. So thank you all so very much. Remember, go to joeandjoe.com. Or go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Joe and Joe Pod. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. And thanks again for doing that artwork, Philip Barnes. It's so good. Remember, we're going to have it on Facebook. We'll put it everywhere we can. And now you, Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.